Hello, everyone. My name is Cees Hek. I actually gave my first talk at a YAPSI conference in Chicago, 2006, and this is my second talk, so it's been a while. So I want to talk about undef. So there's usually two different ways that we use undef. You either assign undef to a variable, or you pass a variable to undef. You guys used the first one? Anybody use the first one? How about the second one? Both? So the question is, do they do the same thing? So that's what I want to have a look at. So we can look under the hood a little bit by using a module called develop_peek, and it will give us some information about a variable. I have this extra line here because I'm going to be working with long strings and I don't want to overflow my screen, so it's only going to show me a portion of the strings in memory. And then I'm going to create a large string. So we're going to take that string and multiply it by 10,000 to create a relatively large string. And then we're going to dump it out. And this is what we end up with. So this gives us a bit of an internal representation of what Perl has internally. We get a scalar value. What these things actually are is not that important to the talk, so I'm going to skim through it pretty quickly. We have some flags there. We have a pointer value where the actual string is, and you can see part of the string there, only 18 characters of it. And then we have the number of characters in the string and the number of bytes allocated. So 60,000, 60,002 bytes, probably a null at the end, so it's pretty close to what we expect. So what if we create that large string and then we assign a small string to it? What are we going to get? Well, it actually, the length of the string is right, but the number of bytes is still the same. Kind of makes sense because usually when you get a chunk of memory, you can change the values in it, but we're not going to shrink that automatically. But what if we assign undef to it? So now we're passing, or we're basically assigning undef to our variable. What happens now? Well, our length of our string is still 60,000. And we have a PV with the entire string still in it. But our flags are now gone. So when you assign undef to a variable, it's not actually clearing any of that memory. All it's doing is it's clearing those flags, and that flag is telling us that that PV is no longer relevant. But it's all still in memory, so you haven't actually cleared anything. What if we do it the other way? What if we pass the variable into the undef function? Because undef is actually just a function that returns an undef value. In this case, it looks a bit different, and our PV is now actually gone, so it has actually cleared up that RAM and made it available to another variable in Perl. Perl can now assign it somewhere else. Okay, so there's actually a difference between assigning undef to a variable and calling undef on a variable. So how does this work with scope? Here we have a little function, and we declare a lexical variable in there. And I'm going to dump our variable before I assign to it, and then after as well. So before I assign to it, we still have that scalar value there, but it is effectively null. It has nothing in it. And afterwards, well, it looks the same as the first example. We have a bunch of data, and it's basically the same as before. Now, I'm going to call that function again, and we're going to create a small string instead. So when we start, again, our SV looks like it's pretty empty. But now, after we assign a small string to it, we're back to the same thing. So our data block is still huge, even though we're assigning a small string to it. So your lexical variable goes out of scope once you return from the function, but the data is all still there. So Perl is keeping that available to you. We could call undef at the end of the function, and if I skim through this quickly, the second time through, you can see now it has a new PV and we have a bit of data. So you can clear that value. Why should you care about this? Well, honestly, you shouldn't. Because Perl is doing this for a reason. 99.999% you really don't want to do anything different because Perl knows what it's doing. You won't gain much from this by doing this, and there's a very good chance if you undef all over the place, you're going to slow down your program. But it's nice to know what's going on under the hood. So when can you use it? say at the start of a program, you slurp in a big file, a config file, say, and then you turn it into a hash. You're never going to use that large string anymore, so undef it and free it up. Very simple case where you could use it. And also, maybe you're pulling data from a database, and sometimes you're pulling massive blobs out. Maybe just undef it when you're pulling a large amount of data out and not otherwise. So, in summary, they're not the same. Assigning undef or calling undef is different. And Perl doesn't like giving up memory, so it's doing that for a reason. It's for performance. You're going to call those functions multiple times. You might as well not recreate those PVs there. So yes, it can be useful sometimes, but don't abuse it. Make sure that you test it. If you do this, make sure that it benefits your code. And that's everything.